I want to talk today about one of the most common dynamics that I see within marriages and relationships, and that is two fearful avoidants, one that typically leans avoidant and one that typically leans anxious. And usually they will be the opposite of one another. Whenever one leans anxious, the other will lean avoidant, and sometimes they can switch. So there's sort of this push-pull dynamic that goes on. So no one in the relationship really feels safe. For the anxious partner, because they are always sort of waiting for the other shoe to drop, they are going to really want closeness. They're going to be very hypervigilant and always sort of looking to see if there's any changes in tone or behavior or anything going on with the other partner. Now, the avoidant partner is going to be someone who prefers more autonomy and space, and they're not going to want as much closeness, which is going to make the anxious partner feel unsettled. And so whenever the anxious partner wants to regain closeness or connection because they're not comfortable with the amount of space that the avoidant needs, they're going to bring up that concern. But they're not very good at expressing their concerns, and so they're going to usually do it in protest behaviors, whether they just sort of have an off attitude and then when asked what's wrong, they're just fine, whatever, when clearly something's wrong. Or if they start to give the silent treatment, they may even do things like nitpick or just start to create little fights. Another thing that they will do is become like a perfectionist, like go around the house and everything's got to be perfect, and they're just sort of venting and nagging and just really stressing everybody else out, which causes the avoidant, who does not like conflict and really prefers peace, to sort of shut down and back away because they're uncomfortable, which then makes the anxious partner even more anxious, and they're wanting to lean in more, but they don't know how to do that in a productive way. And because the anxious partner is so in tune and so hypervigilant, they're going to bring a lot of issues to the avoidant partner, who already feels like they're failing and they're never going to be able to meet the needs of their anxious partner. Their anxious partner already has the same feeling that no one is ever going to be able to meet their needs, which is one of their big fears and where their mistrust comes from. So those two things working together are not very good. So the hypervigilant partner is going to constantly bring things to the avoidant partner, making them pull away more, making them feel more defective, feeling like they're being criticized, and they're going to be defensive because they already feel like they're struggling in that way. The anxious partner is going to get bigger and larger and go into a fight response as they're desperately trying to get their needs met, because their lack of connection and the lack of emotional attunement to them and really being seen and heard and validated by someone who doesn't know how to do that because they're not in touch with their emotions is very painful to them. So they believe that by getting bigger and going into a fight response, the other person is going to somehow see their pain and be able to show up for them better. When in reality, the opposite happens, right? Because the avoidant partner then feels overwhelmed. They go into a flee or a freeze response, and they're not able to show up at all. So then you have the anxious partner who needs the partner who is avoidant to co-regulate with them. They don't do that. They would rather self-regulate. So they withdraw, disassociate, disconnect, and go want to self-regulate, while the anxious partner is feeling abandoned and rejected and just stuck with these huge emotions that they do not know how to self-regulate and calm their nervous system down. And so both partners are in a trauma response at this part, where the avoidant is overwhelmed. They are in a freeze or flee response. The anxious partner is in a full-on fight response, and they cannot self-regulate their nervous system. And this just goes on every time there's a conflict. The avoidant is not going to bring the conflict back up or really try to meet the needs of the other partner. They haven't been able to validate them, to understand the emotions. They haven't been able to stay present for them to actually show up differently. And so the anxiety for the anxious partner is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. The avoidant partner is not going to bring the conversation back up because they want peace and harmony and want to avoid conflict. But for the anxious partner, if the things are left unaddressed, they don't feel heard and validated, and they continue to feel even more unsafe. So eventually the anxious partner either just becomes more and more anxious, and the avoidant partner just withdraws more and more. And over time, these little attachment ruptures will get bigger and bigger and bigger until there's just a complete explosion, or there's just this disconnect, and the anxious partner is going around trying to control everything, constantly nitpicking, constantly being critical of the avoidant partner, and the avoidant partner is just withdrawing more and more and more. And usually partners realize that they are not showing up well in the relationship, and they're really working on it. They're desperately trying to do things differently. They are constantly praying about it, and they want to do better, and they're using their sheer will to try to show up better every day, right? Kind of like parents when you have a child that is just going through a rough season, and every day you're like, okay, today's going to be better. I'm going to keep my cool. I'm not going to raise my voice. It's just going to be easier. It's the same thing in the relationship, but you just find yourself stuck in these negative cycles and you just can't get out. I have been there, and I promise you that there is a way out. I developed a program after doing my own work and doing my own work with my own husband in our marriage, and we don't have those issues anymore. 85 to 95% of the time, we are living securely attached. Now, no marriage is perfect. There's always going to be times when insecure attachment behaviors pop back up because we're normal human beings and we're not always perfect. And we do have fears and underlying things that we struggle with about beliefs about ourselves and about relationships and about others and insecurities that come up. But we don't live in that world anymore. So there is the possibility to get better. So what I do in my program is I use both a spiritual perspective and reframing all of the lies that you're believing that are creating these behaviors and the views of your partner that are creating these behaviors. We realign those to God's truth, and then I give you practical tools and strategies and even scripts to help you show up better, as well as insight to understand yourself and your partner so you understand why you are doing these things. Understanding is not enough. You have to actually have the tools and the know-how, and you have to actually be able to regulate your nervous system before we can even do a lot of this work. So that is all in my program, but I just want to assure you that there is hope, and that if you can see yourself in that dynamic that I just explained, you don't have to stay in that dynamic. So go to my page, lesliewellsconnectioncoach.com, and take a look at my program and see if it's something that would be able to help you either maintain your marriage so it doesn't get to a place where it blows up, or maybe your marriage is already blown up, or you're just so disconnected and you need a full marriage transformation.